Code Board of Appeals. Board members, our normal chair, Mr. Carroll, is not here, so we'll need to nominate a chair for this meeting. So does anyone wish to be chair, or does anyone want to nominate someone for chair for this meeting?
Well, I'll nominate our assistant chair, Mr. Langhorn.
I second that.
He's an expert at it by now.
Oh, I feel an ambush coming, Jim. Any discussion on that?
Well, that being said, we'll call this meeting to order.
All in favor? Let's take a vote real quick. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, unanimous. And Jim, here comes the agenda that's for the chair.
Thank you.
It's a little bigger, it's a little easier to follow, and then the speaker slips.
Thank you. All right, so this meeting of the Board of Appeals for Fire and Building Codes is now in session. I'm going to start with a roll call to my right.
Well, I'm here, Vince Wood.
Thank you, Vince.
Bonnie Elliott here.
James Langhorn here.
John Maloney here.
Paul Spieler here. Andrew Stuffler here as staff.
So I can declare a quorum at this point. All right. We'll now open the public comment for anyone wishing to speak on items not on this agenda. Please note, due to time constraints, each person may be limited to 2 minutes.
Mr. Chair, I'm just going to add here, normally we have amendments to the agenda after the public comment, but it turns out that as you'll see, I think each of the board members received an email that was sent to me last night at 8 o'clock. I got it this morning. That the appellant for 129 East Anapamu withdrew their appeal. So we won't be hearing that item, but you may have some people here who want to comment during the public comment period. In general, not necessarily about the specifics of this, but in general about the topics associated with it.
Thank you. Can everybody else hear Andrew besides me?
Hello, my light's on.
Maybe I should get closer.
Can you crank? Is that, I'm almost eating it.
That's
okay.
Thank you. All right. First that I have for public comments would be Mr. Reiling. And this is regarding 129 East Anapamu. He represents Accessible Santa Barbara.
Okay, so I'll correct that. That item's been taken off the agenda. So not going to talk about the item that was agendized, which is whether or not the temporary occupancy should continue. I did want to throw out an accessibility issue related to the ongoing process on this project, which is going to continue for the next months. It is in plan check now with the city, and plan checkers do a great job, but there's this constant tension with hardships versus accessibility. So I just wanted to give you all an example of that and get it into the record by submitting what I brought to the city. So I'm going to go ahead and give each of you a copy of something. And again, this is nothing to do with the temporary occupancy issue, but what is pending on this project.
Thank you. You want one of these?
What's pending on this project is a building permit for the interior work. And yes, there'll be some accessibility done to the outside as well, and I'm not going to comment on that. That was going to be the subject of the hearing. So what I'm submitting to the city is just some evidence, some extrinsic evidence, because the city often has no choice but to accept what the applicants represent to them. And in this case, since there appears to have been extensive work done to the interior without permits, it's fortuitous that the applicant actually had a photographic record made of the interior when they first took over the premises. So that's your left-hand photo. And the right-hand photo is from their own Facebook page, and from a few months ago. It essentially looks the same today. And what we're seeing here, and we're going to leave this up to the city's plan check staff to address, just want to make that clear. And is that they actually constructed a barrier. And this never would have been approved, in my opinion, by the plan check staff, but that raised area in the restaurant there is just not something that would have been approved. That becomes a thorny issue. People doing work without permits is really become an epidemic in the city, and this is the sort of problem that arises. And it's difficult and costly for the applicant to subsequently rip out something that they've already done. So it's a difficult issue. It may come back to you guys after the building permit issues. I mean, if there's a dispute over what's required at that point. So anyway, I've learned to be brief, and thank you very much, and welcome board members who I haven't met before. Thank you.
Thank you, Will. I appreciate it. And Anna Marie Elliott had donated her 2 minutes to Will as well. So are you sure you're complete? All right, thank you. In addition, I have a Jim Marston. And
Make sure, you said the hearing was canceled for 129, correct?
The appellant withdrew their appeal.
Are they coming back, or?
No, right now they've withdrawn their appeal, so they have no appeal pending, and they're sitting without a certificate of occupancy, going through plan check.
Well, I'll just make my comment general that I came to talk about that.
okay,
But you all remember me. I'm the chairman of the Access Advisory Committee, and I've come to you before and said in your hands are the civil rights of a group of people, and try to impress it upon you. Now we know we can't block Muslims or Jews from going to that restaurant. We can't stop people of color from going to that restaurant. We can't stop the gay and lesbian community from going. But somehow they can stop people in wheelchairs and people who can't climb stairs from going. This is ridiculous. It's been going on for over 2 years, and they knew about it. The plans of 2015 and 16 both show a wheelchair lift. They decided not to put it in, and now they're putting pressure on the city, and they're making Mr. Stuffler look like the bad guy for kicking a business out of town. If people want to build stuff without a permit and do it incorrectly, the building department would be idiotic to support that. They have to say no. So please, when you look at this, there's no reason why you should open up a restaurant for 2 years. They've worked on it, and they have not put in what's required. And they're blocking certain people from going there, which is totally, I think, not the American way. So I'll leave it at that. But this, to me, was really egregious.
thank you, Mr. Marston. Andrew? Mr. Stuffler, am I to understand that this issue's been continued, or has this issue been dismissed, or where are we at with it?
So they have withdrawn their appeal. That means it's not pending. There's no appeal on the books, so they are going to comply with the order that we've issued and go through the standard process.
All right, thank you. That was the last of the public comment speaker slips I had. Is there anybody else in attendance who needs 2 minutes? Okay, thank you. Need a motion for the approval of minutes for the Building and Fire Code Board of Appeals meeting of June 1st, 2017. Are there any comments from the board? Mr. Stuffler, we may have one issue. I know I can't vote on it. I wasn't present. Are there any others that need to abstain?
I wasn't present either, so I was going to abstain.
You can vote on the minutes even if
Okay.
you're not present. The
Really?
minutes are available, and the meetings are recorded, so
Okay.
unless you know
All
of
right.
something, for some reason not to, voice your concerns now, but you can vote.
Okay, well, we need a motion from the board to approve these minutes.
I, Paul Spieler, motion to approve the minutes.
Okay, second?
I'll second it, John Maloney.
All right. Call for a vote. All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? The motion carries. Are there any announcements at this point?
No, Mr. Chair, I already made my announcement on the withdrawn appeal.
Okay, thank you. All right, we have item number 1 on the agenda. It's the appeal of the notice of restricted use for Carrillo Apartments, LLC, located at 930 San Pasqual Street, Unit E-10. Staff, please present and advise of the standing motion.
You're welcome to come up. That's fine. My name's Andrew Stuffler, for the record. I'm the building official for the city. I stand by our staff report, and I'll answer any questions relative to the staff report or the situation at the site. I would like to show a PowerPoint real quick, just to go through the photos that were part of the notice of violation, because they're difficult to really see when they're black and white. So this is the location, general location of the San Pasqual apartments at Carrillo and San Pasqual, just west of the 101. These are two of the photos from the notice of violation. And this is through an interview with the inspector and talking with Lauren Anderson today, just confirming the orange extension cord on the photo in the left is coming from a laundry area. And that same extension cord then comes upstairs and goes into an entry door on the right photo, and is plugged into a wire outlet strip that they then use as a distribution point for other extension cords to provide electricity to the unit. Typical broken cover plate on a duplex outlet and a missing cover on a sub panel. Our electrical violations and missing smoke detectors. These are a little bit more difficult to discern from these photos. So these are two photos of the same area, one looking kind of on one side of the blanket wall and the other on the other side of the blanket wall. So at some point someone put freestanding pantry-style cabinets up. That on the picture on the left where the towels are, that's the back of those pantries, and the blanket is strewn from the corner of the pantry to your right corner of the picture. When you're looking at the right picture, you're standing where that little stick of wood is in the middle of the left picture. That you're looking at it from the other side now, so you can kind of see how they brought the blankets or whatever those are, curtains over. And then here's a pretty standard countertop that's been delaminated at the kitchen sink, so it's unsanitary. And then the kitchen hood vent, which is noted in the notice of violation, was also unsanitary with a lot of grease, peeling paint. And then there was water damage in the ceilings, at least evidence of water damage in the ceilings at the time. So based on these conditions, this is why the inspector posted a placard of yellow. We have two options with our placards. We have yellow and we have red. Yellow is a limited entry. It allows people to go in. There's no structural hazard, but we don't want people sleeping in there. It's not a place for living right now. It needs repairs. But they can go in and get their personal belongings out. The red placard is a placard we put up when it is imminently dangerous. We don't want someone to go in because they could be hurt. So what's interesting about this particular case is that this was May 18th, the condition. And then between May 18th and into the month of June, there were calls to the fire department for some sort of toxic environment inside the unit, which turned out to be cans of resin. But at the time they didn't know it. There was a sheriff deputy. I had an office from the sheriff, call from the sheriff's office asking me, if I knew anything about the condition out there. They had to take one of their deputies to the hospital. He had respiratory problems because of what he encountered in the unit. It turned out the fire engine company had determined that was a can of resin, but evidently it was strong enough that it caused trouble for the sheriff's deputy. And then we had another report that was similar to that, and we went out and actually amended the notice and said no entry, because at that time we didn't know it was resin that was the problem, a can of resin. So we waited until we could get with the fire department and confirm with them that was the hazard and that the hazard was abated. And as soon as we did that, then our staff called Mr. Burns, Mr. Peeney's attorney, and let him know that we had resolved that and that we would amend the notice accordingly. And with that, I'll leave my staff report to stand.
Okay, you're on board now.
Thank you, Chairman Pro Tem, Mr. Langhorne. My name's Paul Burns. I represent Mr. Peeney as the owner. Mr. Stuffler, could you put back the pictures of that zebra blanket and the freestanding cabinet? right off the start, I say we completely agree with Mr. Stuffler and his staff that none of this is acceptable, which is why we took legal action to evict this tenant and his half dozen or more illegal subtenants. The reason we're here today for two reasons, and the other issue is thank you very much for finding out that there was an issue with resin. Miss Taylor was kind enough to call me and say, oh my gosh, we had a sheriff's deputy nearly pass out. I think they actually went to Cottage Hospital, and we want you to go ahead and red tag, yellow tag, whatever you have to do if there's a real risk of someone getting hurt. As I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong, the sheriffs found like a surfboard resin or some material in a can. They took it out, they ventilated, and that issue literally went away once the fire department did ventilation, and they're excellent at, I mean, we've all seen them, they can handle that material quicker and faster than anyone on staff could. So that's gone. I think that's off the table as we're here today. We're not looking at, something where someone's going to come in and breathe something that's going to put them in the hospital. The only reason that we didn't take this off the record is that we spent money on architects and experts trying to figure out what kind of permits we need, and the answer is none. When I first, in my report, I wrote, we have partition walls, but when I went in there, I saw a freestanding cabinet, a clothesline with a blanket. These are not the type of materials that require demolition permits. The other remedies are painting, primarily. There is a little damage to the formica in front of the sink. That was a $98 piece of granite. Mr. Peeney gets those in bulk. I have some pictures of what the unit looks like. We have a simple request. Also, there was that we get our certification from Lentz because someone found cockroaches. These were horrendous tenants. They were, everything that is said is true. It was dirty. They had people living. I have the first picture, and I apologize that I don't have duplicates, is showing the area where the partition is. The clothesline came down, the freestanding cabinet came out, painting was done. All of this was less than $300. I can't find a place where any of that requires a permit, although we did have an architect go through the expense of drafting up what that might look like. And I would even hope maybe I could get a stipulation from Mr. Stuffler that we could have Ms. Anderson come out and inspect. We could submit the certification from Lentz Pest Control and call it a day. The job that Mr. Stuffler and his staff does is vitally important. We all live in this town. Our families are here. We're very grateful for all of our civil services that keep us safe and healthy. But this is not something the landlord did. I mean, it's no secret we're in heated litigation and multi-million-dollar litigation on all kinds of things. But the reason we're here today is because the landlord shouldn't be punished. He's already gone through enormous expense for some bad actors. The unit, it's painted, it's clean, it's safe. No one's going to breathe any toxicants. The fire department was excellent. They came in and got the job done. So I'd ask for a stipulation that we don't have to pay the fee and get a demo permit, but that it can be inspected. The certification from the pest control can testify that the roaches are gone. And we put this one to bed and deal with the much more difficult ones we're dealing with in court. There's really no evidence that the exemptions to a permit apply here. You've got painting, you've got taking down a clothesline and some blankets, removing the freestanding cabinet. There was that little piece that was connected, but I'm not very tall, and it wasn't much over my head. I think there's a rule about 5'9" or something for actual partition walls where you got studs. We got none of that, and unless there's evidence to the contrary that there's some real hardcore construction that has to be removed, I think the city has failed to meet its burden. And again, my first request is that we can get a stipulation for a final inspection and a certification from Lentz. Barring that, I think that the city can't show that there's anything left for us to do except get that inspection. And we would ask for that finding that that the painting and the removal of the clotheslines, which has already occurred, does not require a permit.
All right. Do we have any?
Can I comment on that?
Sure. There's just. I think we'd be coming back to that at some point, though. I don't know that, except that somebody spelled it out for me.
It's okay.
At this point, I'd like to open this up to public comment, if there is any. And again, we've got a 2-minute time constraint on that.
I'm just curious if the electrical issues have been solved.
Can we bring you forward, sir?
Mentioned, so I'm just curious about that.
We're all wondering.
Oh, you know, and my apologies. Mr. Stuffler was kind enough to show us. These were extension cords which were completely unauthorized. We couldn't agree more. People can't use the washing machine outlet to power their extra boom boxes because they have 12 people living in a living room. So you know, the way you handle unauthorized extension cords is you unplug them and you get them out. That's what was done, and you could see the pictures. They're not there, and they're not allowed. You know, nobody's authorized, and our house rules, you know, say you can't modify the electrical or that sort of thing.
Mr. Marston, can I bring you forward and on the microphone? Somebody's trying to keep a record of what we're doing.
I understand you moved the extension cords, but I was concerned more about the open outlets and the open fuse box, the other things that Mr. Stuffler showed. That hasn't been addressed. That's all I'm curious
Well,
about.
thank you very much for articulating that. The $3.50 over and under electric plate has been replaced. There's a question. We asked the electrician if he could simply put a gray cover on the breaker box. It's a breaker box. His response was that was put in at a time when breaker box covers were not required. I think we'd be willing to stipulate if we have to screw one in there, if that's what you want, we'll do it. That's probably not more than a $10 item. I don't know what we could get one of those at Cal Electric Supply for, but it's not an electrical per se. It's a box cover. I think it all falls in the category of superficial.
Okay, Mr. Burns?
Yes, sir.
I'm going to bring you back, but I just want to get back on our agenda.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's all right. So it reads here, after the last person speaks, we will now close public comment. We're good with that? All right. Are there any questions from the board for the appellant?
Well, I just have an observation. I went by the apartment complex a few days ago, and I didn't go to the apartment. I didn't go on the property at all. But I looked at things from across the street, and I also noticed that there were several windows with no screens, and that's a requirement. I realize tenants make things go away, but pay attention. You know, make them. So that makes me question what's not being watched elsewhere. So, but I like the changes. That's
Okay,
nice.
thank you very much. And I will note, since I've become involved, screens disappear, smoke alarms disappear. There apparently, I didn't know this, there is some value to those things, and these type of folks abscond with them. But I know Mr. Pini has his own screen maker, and I'm sure
We screened that building twice.
Yeah, so he's gonna be on it. But thank you.
220 screens each time.
But thank you for pointing that out. And there's no question that screens are important.
Okay. Mr. Maloney, questions?
Yeah, I have a few questions and comments. You're correct on the panel. That particular model of panel didn't have a cover over the front of it. It does have a dead front, which blocks exposed wiring. And as installed, assuming it was at the proper height, looks like from the picture I saw, it looked like it met code. We can go back and double check it real quick. Yeah, some overspray on it, but it's properly installed. As long as that's at the proper height, it's not above 6'8", it should be fine. On the pictures you gave us that we've passed around, it looks like all of the existing receptacles have faceplates on them now. There's one picture of a receptacle that's within 6 feet of a sink, and it doesn't show a GFI protection on it or a GFI receptacle, so that would need to be inspected by the city to confirm that that is correct. And then in a couple of the other photos, there's quite an expansive wall space in that room without any receptacle at all. The code requires a receptacle every 12 feet and within 6 feet of a opening. And it's pretty clear from the photos that that doesn't exist in that space. So I think that's something that would need to be looked at.
Can I make a comment? comment on that?
Sure.
The building was built that way. I think when it was built, those code requirements of every 6 feet weren't a
Every 12 feet,
requirement.
yeah.
So, but we're glad to add it with no problem.
I'm not sure what the date of the construction was,
Yeah, it
but it's been in the
was
code. for-
60s,
It's been the code since the 60s, so if it was
Yeah.
early 60s, maybe
Yeah.
not, you know.
but we will add it, no problem.
Got by.
Mr. Chair, there was no, the NOV did not include the addition of outlets based on a spacing requirement from the
Okay.
NEC, so we didn't find that to be a violation. It's
You
existing grandfathered.
you weren't trying to work it retroactively with this
Correct.
Yeah.
complaint? Okay.
Okay, thank you.
My question, did you have any, I'm sorry, before I lurch?
I have a question.
Go
but-
ahead, I'm going to
okay.
let you go first.
Okay, my name's Paul Spieler, and I had a question on the damaged ceilings from the water damage, and is there is that a requirement that needs to be inspected, to be replaced, make sure there's no mold under there?
So, Mr. Chair, and Paul, the city's required, it's a painting of the inside of a building or the outside of a building does not require, generally speaking, a building permit. When there are violations where we're seeing the interior surface of drywall peeling away, and it's part of other violations, it is something we will inspect. And when we inspect new construction, we do look at it to make sure the drywall is painted and sealed. You can't leave drywall. It's not listed to be left unsealed. It has to be sealed properly. So to that extent, if we're looking at other items, electrical, plumbing, a counter sanitation issue where you don't have the right sanitary surface adjacent to the sink at the kitchen counter, or missing smoke detectors, and we will also look at the wall finishes just to make sure that they're finished correctly.
Thank you. My question for the appellant is, how long had this tenant been in place?
4 to 6 months.
Okay. Thank you.
And we recognized there was an issue, and we immediately served a notice to vacate. I think they went to legal aid to try to get some defense. We overturned that, and we were successful in the eviction.
I would surmise then that the pictures that you've shown us represent what this man had when he stepped into the building. Okay, thank you. Any other questions? All right. Are there any questions from the board for the staff?
I have a question. So, as I see it, the building department wants the items corrected, and they want to come in and inspect those. And isn't that what you want also?
Well, Mr. Pini wanted to try to pull a permit, even though I could not legally find justification for it. So we would ask, so he prepared everything to do that, but I believe that there is no permit required. I believe there is an inspection required, as Mr. Stuffler has indicated, and I believe we have to produce the certification from Lens. So the only remaining issue is whether or not there's a permit for the painting and the removal of these items before we can get an inspection. I think that's all we're basically in contention. And I asked for the stipulation that we could get an inspection without going through the time and the delay. And I'll tell you why. There's a family that wants to move in there, a very nice, hardworking family, and we've had some delays in permits, and we have unfortunately, there is a history here. I'm not saying that anyone's acting selectively or more difficultly, but it's going to slow us down. So we'd rather see them come out this week or whenever. If there's deficiencies, they'll have an opportunity to point out what needs to be corrected. We want to get that family in. So that's the only request, is that the certification of the pest control remain, but the permit not be a requirement for the painting and the removal of the replacement of the receptacles and the removal of the clotheslines and the blankets.
I have a question. Is this restricted use notice still up there?
Yes, it is.
And so obviously you want to get it removed.
Yes.
So what's going to take to get it removed?
An inspection.
Okay.
And that's what we'd ask for.
And you're ready for an inspection?
Mr. Chair, Vince, the notice of violation requires a building permit because some of the violations in the notice do require a building permit. Replacing an outlet, doing electrical modifications require a building permit. And our standard process of confirming abatement and making a record of abatement of violations is to issue a building permit. Sometimes we require plans for that building permit, sometimes we don't. It depends. It's the discretion of the inspector and the situation that we're dealing with. So we need to have the building permit issued, and we can show that some of the items that are listed that we found and the deficiencies in the unit merit a building permit being issued based on the California Building Code, actually the California Residential Code, as adopted by the city.
Okay, well, I'm still not clear on this electrical. It appeared to me it needed a cover plate on the duplex. You say that it doesn't need a cover on the, it looks like a sub panel. That doesn't look like the main panel. But that isn't required?
We
cover?
would have to look at the listing, but I would trust Mr. Mahoney's
Okay, and then-
testimony today.
And yeah, of course, it's pretty obvious it's illegal to have all those extension cords. So what is the permit? I don't understand what electrical permit's required. What needs to be done electrically?
So, well, we need to go through and make sure that electrical violations are abated. So we found broken switch plates, missing smoke detectors, no GFCI in the kitchen. I think they're listed out in the notice of violation. There's several bulleted items. And that's just the electrical. And then we have the plumbing code that requires that there's a sanitary surface adjacent to the kitchen sink. You change that surface, you have to get a building permit to do that. Most people don't come in and get a building permit just to change their kitchen countertop. But if we're cumulatively, if we look at all these violations, we will require a building permit to go out and do the inspection and confirm that all the violations are abated in accordance with the standards in the plumbing code and the electrical code and the building code for the drywall. That's part of our responsibility.
But is that permit, would it cover all the plumbing, the electrical, everything, or does it have to be a separate electrical, separate plumbing?
It's one permit to abate the violations.
Then I would think, go get the permit and be done with it.
We're trying to.
But what's impeding it?
The plans are being inspected by the city.
Okay, so they need to move through the inspection process
Yes.
and then issue a permit, so.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to ask, Sue, do you remember when the application for a building permit was made?
Today.
Oh, today. Did you guys apply for the permit today?
It was a couple days ago, and today the plans were lacking the violations. So I had to go
Okay.
back to Coast to have the violations put on the plans.
Put it on the plan.
So they would accept the plans.
Okay.
I think the only issue that requires even actual electrical is replacement of a standard with a GFCI. I think that's the only thing we're hearing, and I've never seen anyone be required to pull a permit just to do that, to change out that one particular piece. We also have the dollar amount is under the threshold. It's $500. I mean, if we had an inspection and some significant issue arose, the city still has its full panoply of things to do, but requiring a permit for painting, replacing some receptacles, and taking down a clothesline and blankets is a little harsh in this instance.
Smoke detectors.
The smoke detectors were taken by the tenants, and they're up. I don't think they require a permit. They do have to be there. They save lives. But again, you just snap them in. I don't know. You're not going to get a cost that would justify a permit. Again, it's punishing the landlord for the sins of the tenant by making this thing be dragged out.
Yeah, but that's, I got mixed up in a leaky gas tank, and I didn't make the tank leak, but I own the land. So, I mean, that doesn't matter.
Any other questions from the board? Go ahead, Bonnie.
No, I don't have any questions. I was just turning this around.
All right. I did have one for Mr. Stoffler. Question is that you made it clear that all of this is pursuant to a complaint. routinely, people probably aren't going out and getting permits for some of these things. Mr. Stuffler is suffering with the type of job that I did for many years. And if something is complaint-driven, then yes, suddenly the blinders come off and we have to deal with it because it's in our presence. It's right in front of us. So I believe that he's following due process in what he's doing. I don't see anything punitive about this, and I feel that you're well on your way to getting this thing back in order, which I'm grateful for. So I am just about ready to put a motion forward if nobody else has anything else to put it forth at this point. I would put a motion forward in support of the City of Santa Barbara's efforts to remedy this through the process of a building permit to verify that all corrections necessary to make this property tenable under the Health and Safety Code are made evident. That's my motion.
I second it. Paul Spieler.
So, no questions about the motion? Vince, you're 80 now, aren't you? Okay. I usually get more fight. Anyway, so we'll put this to a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, it carries unanimously. Thank you for
Thank
coming
you very
in.
much for your time. We appreciate it.
Mr. Chair, I'm going to, before the appellants leave, just a point of order. So the motion that you made did not address the upholding of the decision of the building official to issue a notice of violation, and that was what that was the appeal today, was about the issuance of the notice of
I'd like to
violation.
make another motion.
Let's do that then. Thank
Okay.
you.
I'd like to make a motion that the board uphold the notice of violation.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
All right. Where am I?
This got verbally changed, right? From no entry to
Oh,
when the...
I'll just put it into his record.
Mr. Chair, you want to close the meeting up?
Yes, at this point, I'd like to close. Got to keep turning pages here. Motion for adjourn.
I motion we adjourn.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Unanimous.
That was the original yellow tag. It had to be replaced because it kept
Sorry, I
getting
missed that
removed.
piece. I kept hearing building
So
permit,
we
building
put
permit, building
subsequent
permit.
ones. Yeah.
Were they in here? I didn't see them.
No,
Okay.
because with the time that's